Hi everyone, this is Dr. M and this is my weekly reflection on teaching ethnic studies. So this week we are reviewing the experiences of people of African descent in the Americas, primarily focusing on the enslavement and the triangle trade and all the laws and constitutional amendments that came during that period of time. We looked at the history of the people and that were stolen and brought to the United States as chattel. During this period in the course, I begin the discussion with a lecture using what's called a slave medallion. And this is what it is, what it looks like. It looks like this. This is the front and this is the back. And during the lecture, this gets passed around and the students can hold it and feel its weight, and I let them know that at one point in human history this hung on a person that was for sale or auction. This particular presentation was part of a primary sources research project that I did during my doctoral work, and I give a little bit of the history and I go right into the presentation. Part of it is showing a bill of sale. It wasn't necessarily one that was tied to the person that this hung on, but it was an example of a bill of sale for a lot of human beings that were purchased for one price. I highlight some of the line items on that bill of sale or receipt. One of them is a 15-year-old boy who was probably the most expensive single human purchase on that receipt. He sold for $1,500, and it's probably because he was young and strong, still growing, and could be used for breeding. Another person that I highlighted was a 20-year-old woman who came with an infant. So right there, she has proven herself to be fertile and can probably be bred a few more times. And lastly, I highlight another woman who is 26, and she already comes with 4 children under the age of 10. And so she essentially comes with a human litter and she can probably be bred 1, maybe 2 more times before she will need to be used for other purposes. I bring the class's attention to the date of the bill of sale or the receipt. It was 1857. That is about 50 years after there was a ban, an international ban on human chattel slavery, importation of slaves or the enslaved to the Americas. So this meant, and that happened around 1808, and so this meant that in response to this ban, the United States engaged in a campaign of growing our own. We grew our own property in order to maintain an economic system we built with slavery. So I keep my tone very matter of fact. I compare this purchase to one someone would engage in when they're either buying a horse or a cow or even a dog or a cat, where you would check the hair, the teeth, the limbs, the eyes, the mouth, for signs of health before you purchased. This was done to Black people in the United States during this period in our history. Some of the preparatory course material included listening to the trailer in episode 1 of the 1619 project. And then together we watched a little bit of a movie called Traces of the Trade, a story from the Deep North. And this is a sort of a documentary about a family, the Wolf family, from Bristol, Rhode Island. They were the richest family in the late 18th, late 18th, early 19th century America, the United States. And that wealth came from slavery. So we watch a little bit about that, and then we also read an essay from a white Jewish dad who gives 6 reasons why he wants his children to learn about ethnic studies. The energy in the class gets really somber, really heavy, And I sense that the students are working through the themes of the week, given that Monday was a holiday. We only really had one day to go through all of this material. And it was a lot. I completely understand that it was a lot, but it was important that they experience it and they can handle it. I reiterated that they need to know, they need to believe, they need to understand this history, this U.S. history. We then framed the conversation with the 3 constitutional amendments that happened during that period known as Reconstruction between 1865 and 1877. The 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments came online. And then with the change in presidential administration, Reconstruction ended. And it ushered in what many historians call the Great Nadir, or Second Slavery. It was a horrible time, and it led to now what we know of as Jim Crow laws. And it was a horrible, horrible time. A lot of burning of towns, and lynchings went up, and it was just a horrible period in U.S. history. I leave them to sort of explore that aspect of of U.S. history on their own. I didn't have time to talk more about the Great Nadir and the Second Slavery. So I know it's always tough it was a tough time talking through this section, the experiences of Black people. There's so much emotion, and there's guilt and denial and anger, sadness, you name it, and that I can only acknowledge it and ask the students to remember their emotions. Many are hearing this information for the first time, and this time with references, so it's not just random people giving their opinion about what may or may not have happened. So it does take a little bit of time to process, and I sometimes struggle getting through it. I tear up when I listen or watch some of the course material in class. I sense the sorrow and the pain. The bill of sale for me is the thing that reminds me that human beings were sold and bought for a purpose, to make money for someone else. And this really happened, and we must not forget. We must never forget the intentional dehumanization, torture, and murder of Black people. It is a miracle that Black people have survived and thrived to this point. Forgetting is easy. It's less controversial, but it's also lying, and it's intellectually irresponsible. So I make the students understand that it's their responsibility. I reassure them that their emotional response is normal, about as normal as mine, but they need to use what they're learning in class to be better people. And we are still living with the legacy of this history. We must acknowledge and atone and make amends so we can all move forward together in the 21st century. There is no going back. It is now their turn to pick up their assignments and get to work. It's their generation's turn. I'm doing what I can as a Gen Xer, but many of them have only known the 21st century, so it is really on them to pick up the tasks and get to improving things so that we can actually create a more perfect union. Part of what we did at the end, it was considered what's called an exit ticket. So I asked them to reflect on what we've talked about and what they remember about our discussion. And most wrote about the medallion and how it made them feel sad and angry, horrified that this actually hung on a human being. Many didn't want to touch it for that very reason. So I leave them with that emotion to work through it. It's better to know than to not know. This is part of our collective U.S. history, and it's theirs. So next week, we move on to the foundational histories of the Chicano Latino people in the United States. They'll have some readings and a podcast to listen to, and we'll work through the material together. So that's it for now. I'll put the links to the movies and podcasts that I referenced in the notes. And that's about it. But, I signed up to buy me a coffee. Yeah, that new sort of tip kind of website. So if you're so inclined and you want to show your love and support for what you're learning through my videos, buy me a coffee. So thank you, and we'll see each other next time.